Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday. You are watching GoJo and Golic, and here is what is coming up on today's show. So Davante Adams has requested a trade, and apparently he has a couple teams at the top of his wish list. We will get into those teams and how realistic either one of them are. Plus, New York State of Mind. What's going on with the Jets? Feels like that's a question that we ask ourselves weekly, but we will get into that. Plus, sights and sounds from around NBA media days. No, Jimmy Butler did not wear a cool outfit. Bummer, but we will hear about all the teams and what we have to look forward to this NBA season. All that, some more great guests coming up on the show on GoJo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield. We are presented by Campbell's Chunky Soup that eats like a meal, and we got a nice full meal for you guys today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review the show, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern here on the DraftKings Network. Fun one coming up today. We'll get our old friend Claudia Bellofatto stopping by, help us get ready to look ahead to Thursday Night Football coming up tonight. Little NFC South divisional tilt between the Falcons and the Buccaneers. You can catch her with Trey Wingo, Marshall Newhouse on the pregame PowerUp, Emerson Latzia, I'm sure doing something very chaotic there. So we'll check in and see how our buddy's doing, considering the Jags have tanked his hopes and dreams. We will also talk to MLB Network analyst Sean Casey because, Dad, the baseball has been good. Oof. You and I make no bones about it. Not the biggest regular season baseball fans in the world, but I'll be damned if the minute the postseason starts, I'm not sitting there in my chair with everybody watching, especially the wild card round where you've got all these back-to-back-to-back games. The baseball was good yesterday, and now we've got 3/4 of the divisional round set here. The Detroit Tigers continue their improbable run and move on to face your Cleveland Guardians. The Royals continue their epic turnaround. They get the Yankees in the next round. And then the NL, we get the red-hot Padres against the Dodgers in a divisional tilt there. We're still waiting. Only one series left. The Phillies waiting around trying to figure out whether they're going to play the Brew Crew or the Mets, as that one actually makes it the distance and then gets set to go to that Game 3 in the wild card round. So it's been fun, Ted. There's been good drama. There's been good action, and the stakes that come with win or go home at this level of baseball.
Yeah, good notes on the 3 series that are over. San Diego, they took out Atlanta 5-4 in the deciding in the second game to sweep them. Now they take on the Dodgers, and you're right about the Padres being red hot. They own the regular season series against the Dodgers 8-5. So they can handle the Dodgers, and boy, oh boy, now we start talking about the Dodgers, and now that we get the division winners and the top teams in baseball involved, and the Dodgers was a thought of win everything or it's a failed season, going up against a team that kind of owned them in the regular season. Kansas City with another 1-run win, 2-1 after a 1-zip when Bobby Witt Jr. gets the game-winning RBI in both games. He's the first player, there's only 2 now. He's joined Hall of Famer Jimmy Fox as the only players 24 or younger with a winning RBI in each of their team's first 2 postseason games. So obviously Bobby Witt Jr. has been making a great name for himself, the youngster that he is. And for Detroit has the best note about it. Detroit sweeps Houston, and we'll get to Houston and the streak that they had, and now it's over. But are they, the one of the most hated teams around? But for Detroit, I believe there have been 3 other teams that have been 10 back, at least 110 games in to a season when they have go on to make the postseason, and Detroit's the 4th, and the other 3 teams have all won the World Series. So I don't know if Detroit's going to make that run, especially they're playing my Cleveland Guardians. So you know where my heart is on that one, but a hell of a run for Detroit for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you look at teams like Detroit and Kansas City. I mean, the Royals lost 106 games last year. Now, getting back to this point, they end an 8-year postseason drought. Detroit ends a 10-year postseason drought. So it's been cool to see those stories. But you mentioned, Dad, the big one for a lot of people is going to be Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. The Houston Astros had gone to 7 straight ALCS. They failed to reach that for the first time in that many years, and I'm never sure how long this beef has lingered. Now, our friend of the program, Katie Nolan, noted Boston Red Sox fan, did tweet out yesterday, and this is kind of what reminded me, these feelings still fester. I wish I could take that stunned silence in Minute Maid and make it my ringtone. Because there are going to be some people that, as long as the remnants are there, and man, the full circle moment that A.J. Hinch is the manager that sends them home after being the manager that was there during the sign stealing scandal is a bit of, I don't know if it's poetic justice or cosmic justice or just kind of the weird happenstance in coaching where so many guys make the rounds like this. But it did make me wonder, Dad, if people still hate the Astros, and if not, because I felt like they occupied the mantle of most hated team in sports for a while, coming off that scandal and then winning in the face of it, which is always the other part of this, is who is the most hated team in sports right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how long it has festered with their sign stealing situation, but I think you couple that with, how people are in sports. They love to see a run, and, 7 straight years to the ALCS is a hell of a run. So you like to see a run up to a point. And then when you're a better team and you keep making it to a certain point, you start to be hated, and you want to, and people want to see somebody else there, right? You're like, okay, that dominance is over now. Let's see somebody else. So I think it's coupled with the fact that they were there for 7 years in a row.
Oh, there's no doubt that adds. That's a massive force multiplier when you get that. But much like we saw with Michigan this last year in the sign stealing scandal that they had going on in college football, that was a microwave version of this, and certainly a much less technologically complex in some ways. In others, it was very similar, but it still ended with that, both of these teams being able to win through the controversy. Once they had gone through that, they still went out and kept accomplishing to a point where you kind of just had to throw your hands up. And I do feel like if you're an enemy of one of those teams, that almost makes it more maddening that way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Without question, it does. I completely agree. So I love these first round, this wild card series, because it's quick. It's game after game. Boom, you play them and you move on to the divisional round. So you get a lot, as we talked about. It's kind of like the first day of the NCAA tournament. You get a lot of baseball in a specific couple of days. In the case for Milwaukee and the Mets, it'd be 3 days. But I love how quick the games are played, or how many you see of what you can watch, and then you move on and you see if these wild card stories can continue against the upper echelon of baseball.
Going to be fascinating to watch that. At GoJo Golic on Twitter, do you still hate the Astros the same way that you used to?
Yeah.
We know that people wanted their pound of flesh that they didn't get during the 2020 season, and that kind of extended some of this. It kind of pushed that forward to 2021 and beyond. But I'd be curious if people still harbor those same feelings. We'll talk to Sean Casey, as we mentioned, about if this is finally the end of that dynastic run, if there's reason to believe that the fall off, because remember, they started slow this season. We're staring up at the Mariners for a while before marching their way back like a horror movie villain to finally get to this point, but ultimately fall short. So we'll see what the future holds for them. But Dad, if we're talking about teams that elicit a complicated response, I do feel like we've arrived at this place with the Kansas City Chiefs, where now, really through no fault of like actual villainy or anything done wrong, but just through sheer force of winning, through being the team everyone talks about, having the quarterback that everyone loves, and certainly after last year, having a tight end that's become one of the most famous people in the country by way of one of the most famous women in the world that he dates, there's a lot of people that are starting to look at the Kansas City Chiefs the way you described, Dad, which is, all right, we're ready for somebody else to win. And so far, they haven't gotten their chance this season. The Chiefs are one of the 2 remaining unbeatens in the NFL, but it hasn't quite looked the way that we all expected. And a lot of people, myself included, were willing to excuse that away. I thought this was interesting yesterday. Dominique Foxworth, our good friend and ESPN NFL analyst and co-host of the Dominique Foxworth Show, said this on his podcast, that he has very real concerns about the Chiefs, specifically on offense with Patrick Mahomes right now.
I think the Chiefs' offensive problems are more than a weapons issue. And
really?
Yeah, I think their offensive – I think
the left tackle?
It's not just the left tackle. It's also the quarterback. And maybe it's a result of the left tackle, but the quarterback is not comfortable in the pocket and he's not playing well. I think that's and the one big play they had to where they had 7 people in protection, and it was a great throw. And I think Patrick Mahomes did magical Mahomes things in that game also, but he's very uncomfortable right now playing football, and it doesn't look great.
And, Dad, when you look at the stats behind that, according to Next Gen Stats, Mahomes averaged 5.1 air yards per attempt through 4 weeks, the lowest mark of his career. 71.7% of his passes have been thrown 10 air yards or less, the 8th highest rate among qualified quarterbacks. And he's averaged just 0.8 air yards per attempt on those shorter passes, the 2nd fewest among all qualified quarterbacks. And I don't know, Dad, is Dominique right? Has Patrick Mahomes looked different to you this year than he has in the past?
Oh, yeah, I covered him in a game a couple of weeks ago, and he was just flat out off on his passes. Threw a pick in the end zone on an underthrown ball, was throwing behind receivers. I mentioned it a few times on the broadcast. He just looked off. He didn't look like and he set the bar so high. That's the thing, the expectation of
Dad,
what
to your point on that play about how high the bar is set, I remember the exact interception you're talking about, because if you look elsewhere in the picture on the screen, Travis Kelce's so used to those being touchdowns from Patrick Mahomes, you actually see him holding his hand up as the one, because he assumes it's going to be a score as Pat underthrows that ball slightly into an interception. Like, to your point, they've become so conditioned to believing that they can do the walk-off celebration like they're Steph Curry, because that's how great their quarterback's been.
And it was deja vu. It was against Atlanta, and it was Jesse Bates who picked it off, who had 6 interceptions against Mahomes when Jesse got the other 5 when he was with Denver. He has looked off in his passing. Now, whether it's they've got their second player at left tackle, Wanye Morris is the latest, whether the interior of that O-line, which is the strength, are they giving a little bit of ground, not so much sacks, but ground in the pocket to Mahomes. But we're so used to Mahomes making magic, making something out of nothing, and not a lot of times it's nothing because that line has usually been so good. But I think like anything else, Mike, it's never one thing. It's a combination of things, because you sit there and I agree with Dominique. It's not about the weapons. Last year, while Kelce led the way with 93 receptions, you had a rookie in Rashee Rice that was second, I think, with 79 catches. You had 12 players catching double-digit passes last year. So Mahomes is going to find people to throw the ball to. So I think I agree with Dominique and say it's really not a weapons situation.
That's the part where I'll disagree is it looks like his confidence in those weapons has started to affect him because it looks like he's holding on to the ball in certain instances. He doesn't feel comfortable or confident in where these guys are going to be. And so that all works back to him. And Dad, it was one of those things where usually at the beginning of the season, because we talked about this with Travis, where, hey, people were like, is Travis going to play himself to shape at the beginning of the season, yada, yada. Mahomes has also now had multiple off seasons where he's played late into the year, where his process has been affected, and he's tasked with helping break in these new weapons every year at the beginning of the season. And this year we thought it was going to be Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. It's just Xavier Worthy. Then you go and lose Rashee Rice and you mix up the bag. Like, I'll be curious in the coming weeks how this looks because I'd imagine they're going to be more reliant on Travis Kelce the way they were in this last game against the Chargers in the coming weeks while they try and figure out, hey, what exactly are we going to do? Because Worthy, you can see them trying to get him key touches. We know Juju Smith-Schuster is a guy that's kind of operated as a pseudo tight end in that same midfield area. But in the meantime, I do wonder if him defaulting to more of Travis Kelce helps get that back up. Because, Dad, to your point about the offensive line, they're 30th in pressure rate. He's not getting pressured a ton by NFL. Now, they're moving the pocket around. They're doing rollouts, rollbacks. Pat's been really good about getting the ball out in time, anticipating that rush to try and help these guys. He's getting the ball out faster than he ever has in his career so far this season, an average time to throw of 2.74 seconds, which is well below normal for him. So part of this feels anticipatory by him, but I think this has all just been enough change finally, which is ironic because he weathered the Tyreek Hill change, the biggest one that you could go through, in a way that made it look easy, that we all just assumed, oh, this is going to be every year he can turn this over. Maybe we're seeing the limits for that finally.
And we're also seeing an era of quicker passing, right? I mean, I think every quarterback, I mentioned it in the game last week with Baltimore and Buffalo. Josh Allen has the quickest release time of his career this year, 2.7 seconds. The ball is just coming out quicker on all the quarterbacks. It just seems to be where we are in the NFL rut. Which will probably change again. Is that based on the cover two that Mel Kiper wants gone, that they're just trying to throw the ball quicker on hitches, on slants, on quick screens? So I don't know, but it's definitely a trend now in the NFL, the quicker throw. Remember last year they lost their first game against Detroit. Then they won 6 in a row before they lost their next game. The bottom line is they are undefeated. Pat Mahomes may be, again, mad at the way they're doing their business, but they are undefeated.
I would say to that, though, Dad, is this a situation where does this feel at all similar to the Eagles last year, where they were winning but it didn't feel right, where they were winning but it didn't feel unsustainable, where you were kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop?
Well, I mean, you also had the relationship of Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni, where you don't have that any butting of the heads or any kind of maybe weird looks at one another or weird comments from Jalen Hurts about the Sirianni offense. You don't have that with Mahomes and Andy Reid. They're entrenched, both as Hall of Famers right now with a great working relationship. So maybe on the field, we'll see. I mean, we'll see if it falls off for Kansas City. We saw it fall off for Philly at 10-1, so we have a ways to go before that. But for Kansas City, they have New Orleans coming up, then a bye, then they're at San Francisco, at Vegas, and home to Tampa and Denver. So I mean, I don't think they're playing as well as they have. But the offense didn't play as well as it played last year, and they still won the Super Bowl. They're just perfectionists, right? Because they are the dominant team in the NFL. They expect greatness at all times. And when it looks a little bit off, we kind of all go, what's wrong? But then you look at the win column, and they're one of only 2 teams in the NFL that are undefeated.
Yeah, it is a testament to that, and so much of them is like the comparative politics of the previous iterations of themselves, and we saw how difficult winning was last year, and we're like, all right, man, they're not going to want to do that again. Hey, they brought in all these fast guys, they're going to throw it deep down the field, and so far that hasn't married up with reality this season, and you just wonder if they can afford to win by those margins again when right now they're going to be down their best receiver, at least for the foreseeable future, in Rashee Rice. And on defense, yeah, they've been very good, but they clearly missed L'Jarius Sneed in the back end of that defense. Like, there's been an effect to some of the talent they've had to let walk out the door.
Well, you say they're down their best receiver. Remember, they're down their best rusher, too, in Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they've had to deal with change, but usually that change came with a player leaving in the offseason and them acquiring or drafting another player. This is happening during the season. This is an injury to Rashee Rice, the top receiver, an injury to Pacheco, the top running back. So that's dealing with things right away up front. Carson Steele has tried to go in there and fill the role, but he's fumbled a couple of times, and you get lost faith when you fumble the ball. So Kareem Hunt is going to get, the chance to get the majority of carries. And I would imagine Travis Kelce would start to up his total. Xavier Worthy certainly going to with the absence of Rice.
There's no doubt about it. So we'll wait and see. They are still, as you mentioned, one of the two undefeateds in the league. They deserve that respect. We'll see if they get it as I update my power rankings from the beginning of the season later on in the second hour of this show. But coming up next, let's take a look at Thursday Night Football, a division tilt between the Buccaneers and the Falcons. Can Jesse Bates and that defense you mentioned get one over on Baker Mayfield? Our friend Claudia Bellofatto stops by to help us look for some best bets next. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We got Thursday Night Football coming up on the scene tonight. Buccaneers and Falcons in the NFC South. Both teams off to a pretty good start this season, especially relative to the expectations of that division. And so as we look ahead at that, we welcome in one of our old friends around here at GoJo and Golic and one of the co-hosts of the PreGame PowerUp that you guys can check out 6 p.m. Eastern, Mondays and Thursdays, leading into the primetime action, along with Marshall Newhouse, Trey Wingo, and, of course, our buddy Emerson Lazia. Claudia Bellofatto back in the mornings here. How you doing, bud?
Hey guys, good to catch up with you. Yeah, the show's been a ton of fun. Jesse was joking before I came on here that it's always scary to see where Emerson ends up and who he talks to and what he's eating on camera, but it's a whole lot of fun.
We do have to apologize for you having to work with that Wingo guy that we had to work with at ESPN.
Yeah, you know, he's tough. I really have to carry the load there, but he's okay. No, Trey's awesome. He's been a ton of fun to work with, and we fit so much in the show. You know, after doing the show with you guys, those went quick, but this is a 1-hour show, and we fit so much, have a ton of awesome guests in there. It really flies by, but it's been a ton of fun.
And you guys have gotten some pretty good games along the way. You've been in Monday night doubleheader season, which always helps to have 2 games to get to think about and lead into there. But Thursday night football, always kind of a mixed bag. We know the short week and injury, such a big part of this. And as we look ahead to tonight, that's certainly going to be a big story tonight for the Buccaneers. Right tackle Luke Gedeke going to be out again. D lineman Kalijah Cansey and all-pro safety Antoine Winfield Jr. still on the shelf for these 2 teams. And so, Claudia, looking at that, the Atlanta Falcons, understandably 1.5-point favorites, albeit at home. So this is essentially a pick-em between 2 teams that both have a chance to win the NFC South. So when you look at this one on paper heading into it, what's the most interesting part of this matchup for you, especially from a betting side as you're looking for places to lay something down?
Yeah, those injuries stand out, especially when I think the edge here comes in the trenches and the Falcons unable to get a ton of pressure up to this point. But that's something the Bucs have done so well, specifically with the blitz. And as you guys know, Kirk Cousins, one of the weaker quarterbacks against the blitz this year, specifically 3rd worst completion percentage. So that's sort of the angle I was taking and leaning the Bucs. And when you look at what the Bucs have done, Baker really looks like he's found his home. He looks super comfortable. All of his weapons, you know, in the passing game healthy. They've really only had that one Broncos, you know, blip on their timeline, and I think that was an outlier. They bounced back big against the Eagles. So I like the Bucs. With that said, like you said, it's a pick 'em. They're on the road. What I would do in this spot is throw them in a 6-point teaser. Find another dog or maybe a favorite where you can tease them through without getting, you know, too crazy, too specific here. You're basically taking 6 or adding 6 points to a team. And it's a parlay, so both have to cash, but I think the Bucs are a really good spot. Maybe if you like the Bengals, you want to get them through 2 key numbers, so that's 3 and 7. Grab the Bengals at +2.5 against the Ravens. That is what I expect to be a tight game too. I don't want to sweat it, guys, all right? I've been sweating too much over the past 4 weeks, so instead of taking the Bucs with 1.5, get them up over a touchdown. I feel a whole lot better about that.
How about in-game specifics? Baker Mayfield over 243.5 yards, over 22.5 completions. I mean, Atlanta is the worst in the league at sacks. They only have 4 sacks, so they're not getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. So you think Baker may have time to throw the ball.
Yeah, as long as the protection is there, I think completions is a really safe number for him in this game at 22.5. So all he needs is 23 or more. And he's done that in all but 1 game so far, a lot of different game scripts. He's coming off a game with almost 50 attempts. You could go attempts. I feel a little bit better about the completions because of that pressure rate you talked about. That's not really there with the Falcons. So if the attempt volume is there, which I do think it should be with this being a tight game, and that's reflected in the line, facing a Falcons squad that's allowing the 6th most attempts a game, 22.5 for Baker feels pretty safe to me.
Yeah, the Falcons dead last in pressure percentage on defense, getting to the quarterback at a league low 22.4% of the time. So it's been a mighty struggle on there. On the other side, for Kirk and this Atlanta offense, totally different problem going up against the Todd Bowles defense, where we know Kirk Cousins, while it's looked better, Claudia, than it did week 1, where he just looked completely immobile back there, trying to operate out of the pistol. It looked uncomfortable for everyone involved. He's looked somewhat better, but he's still an older quarterback that's coming off a lower body injury last year, going up against Todd Bowles, who, if we know one thing about a Todd Bowles defense, he's going to go and try and heat him up. So is there anywhere to make money off this Falcons offense that you can find?
Yeah, and I just loved how everybody thought Kirk, and I understood that it was an upgrade, but everybody thought he was going to be the savior. Was nobody thinking about the age or the injury he was coming off of? So I was never too high on this Atlanta team. And a player like Kyle Pitts is somebody that I'm targeting. And I could be totally wrong. This could be the game he goes off, but I have waited long enough. I have waited. I have looked at his numbers. I said, they're too low. I'm going to go over, and I'm not alone in this. And nothing has happened. I keep saying, I'm waiting for him to pop off. It's going to happen. I'm over it, guys. Okay. Kyle Pitts has done nothing. And I don't know if that's him. I don't know if it's the offensive scheme they're having or if it's Kirk. Now, with that said, I understand if they were getting Kirk under a ton of pressure, Kyle Pitts might be that sort of safety blanket. This is the, opportunity he gets to go off. But if we're talking props, I look at this number of 31.5 receiving yards. He's cashed this over just once. He had 0 catches on 3 targets last week. When it comes to targets, he is the 5th option in the passing game right now on this offense. So yes, I understand the situation might be ideal for him, but also look at what Tampa has done. They've been one of the best teams at limiting tight end production. So overall for this Falcons team, I do think, and we all know this, if you watch the games, they've clearly improved. Kirk Cousins looks a lot more comfortable, but Kyle Pitts hasn't been part of that conversation. So if you guys are looking for another prop, this is the one that might burn me. I feel better about the Baker, but I need to see something, guys, from Kyle Pitts before I'm putting my money on the overs.
I am so with you. A couple of times I've taken him in our family's DraftKings Sunday fantasy teams that we put together. I just keep waiting for him to go off, and he's not. He's not getting the separation. He's had a couple of drops as well. But I keep thinking the next game's going to be the game. So it makes me wonder where to go. Do you try and go over on this thinking he's going to, and then you just get let down again?
Yeah, I mean, that's the fear. And I guess people would also say that's the tactic. We call it buying low. So right now, everybody's probably looking to the under on Kyle Pitts like me. And this is the time to buy low and go over. But I like to see it before I actually put my money on it. But again, this is a game where I don't love it. I usually have a few different plays. Definitely feel stronger about the Baker and the teaser in this spot. It's also a possible live bet game, guys. I don't know if you've gotten into that at all, but I found that to be really profitable, especially although we're 5 weeks in, we don't have a total grasp on what these teams, are supposed to be doing out on the field. A squad like the Bills you watched last week, and, maybe that's a bad example because you thought, oh, they're going to bounce back. You live bet them. But 2 teams like this, where they both have specific weaknesses, they are supposed to keep this game close. Say the Falcons come out and score first. That's a good spot if you didn't bet the Bucs pregame to grab them at some better value with the plus money or the plus points if they go down early.
Yeah, we talked to Jordan Brenner and Peter Keating from Underdogs podcast about that, how especially in this modern version of the NFL where you get so much less time in preseason, the first 4 weeks can kind of be chaotic in a way that can be financially helpful for you if you're in the right spots here. I guess zooming out big picture and looking at this game, Claudia, these are 2 teams that in a wide open NFC South this year, sans the Panthers, who might improve now that Andy Dalton's at quarterback, but still seem a long ways off from everything else. This Buccaneers team, the Atlanta Falcons, currently the betting favorites on DraftKings Sportsbook right now, followed by the Bucs. The Saints lagging at 3rd behind. Now, not a huge delta between the 3 of them here, but could this be a time to potentially look and snatch up the Saints? How do you handicap this division based on what we've seen through a quarter of the season so far?
Yeah, just like you said, you try to buy the dip, you try to buy low on a Saints squad that everybody seems to forget. It just takes 1 or 2 games. Everyone seems to forget the onslaught of points that they had coming through the first 2 weeks. I like them this week. I think there's certainly a lot of spots you can grab them in, but looking at those division odds, we knew this was going to be tight. I don't think anybody expected any of these teams to really shine too early in the season, but the Saints are one of the teams that did, I think, early on, and I don't think we can forget that. So I mean, I can do a whole soliloquy on the Chiefs because I'm going hard on fading them. So I do like the Saints this week. And of course, if they get a win, those odds are going to change. So I jump on the division odds now. Do you guys want to hear my hating on the Chiefs, or are we out of time?
I mean, listen, the floor is yours if you're ready to dump.
Go
on
ahead.
I'm just getting this out as much as I can because everybody gives the Chiefs loves. I'm saying this now because now is the time to bet the other team. If you want to bet somebody for the AFC, if you want to bet somebody for the Super Bowl, the Chiefs are still the favorite. Not a super heavy favorite, but they are still the favorite. So I understand they haven't lost a game yet, but now you take away, already we're without Hollywood Brown, and you guys all know this. You take away Rice, you don't have Pacheco. Mahomes already is a bottom 10 in QBR right now. And for everybody out there in fantasy, it is okay to bench Patrick Mahomes. I'll say that again. It is okay to bench Patrick Mahomes. Okay, people, the volume, the production is not there right now. And maybe that's specifically in fantasy, but you take away all of his weapons. That makes it difficult. I think the Saints bounce back big, and I would fade the Chiefs and look at some other players in the AFC and for the Super Bowl if you can now.
If you needed any more reason to go and check out the pregame power-up coming up later tonight, let it be right here. Claudia Bellofatto starting off the morning, scorching hot here. Claudia, it was good having you back around here. We appreciate you helping us get ready for Thursday Night Football. Have a great show. Take care of Trey Emerson and Marshall, and we'll talk to you again soon. All right, buddy?
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. See ya.
See ya.
Now, Dad, scorching hot. Listen, everyone's getting the Chiefs takes out right now. We played the sound from Dominique earlier. Smart football people are looking around at this team. I saw Ben Solak write it the other day and say, hey, this is a little bit off right now. There might be time to actually worry about the Kansas City Chiefs team, which I was surprised. I thought we got to the dynasty point like the Patriots where everyone was going to back away slowly from these takes. They have emboldened the masses.
They're still undefeated. I will reserve judgment until they lose a game. And they could lose, to Claudia's point. They certainly could lose to New Orleans this week, but they haven't. They've been close games, and they haven't. And they're going to get used to the new players that are filling in for Pacheco with Hunt and whoever else Patrick's going to throw to outside of Rashee Rice. They'll get a working relationship. So I'm again, now I'm not laying down money, so I'm not
I
at
was
risk
just
of
going to
losing
say,
any
easier to
money.
say when the dollars aren't on the line, but you know what, Dad?
True.
That might fit into you, the idea, stats are for losers. It sounds like a little bit of what you're saying here, and that was the sentiment. I want to go back to Kyle Pitts in this game last night that we got from Raheem Morris, his head coach, when he got asked about Kyle Pitts and some of the stats here. This was Raheem Morris talking about his star tight end and the lack of statistical volume that he's getting right now.
Hey, Coach. Rashad Milligan here. I wanted to ask you about, you said there were some things that you guys can work on and you're glad it happened in the win. One thing that was kind of like eye-popping on the stat sheet is Kyle Pitts, 0 catches today. Just how cognizant are you of getting him more involved?
It's just about going out there, winning the game when you're out there and you're playing. He had a couple of targets today, had a couple of things going out that way. We believe we got a questionable call at the end of the stretch again to Kyle, and those things are always unfortunate, but really for me, man, stats are for losers, man. I don't get involved in that stuff, but you go out there, you try to win each game, and we were able to win it today, and that's what we did.
Dad, that feels like something that's up your alley here. Stats are for losers.
Yeah, but Kyle Pitts not being as involved in this offense is somewhat eye-popping. As Claudia mentioned, he is the fifth targeted guy on that offense behind wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs. So, I mean, it is somewhat befuddling. Now, you do watch some of his routes. He doesn't have as much separation as you would like for the athlete that he is. I mean, we have seen him stretch a field as a tight end. And I'm somewhat amazed. Like I said, there's 3 wide receivers and a running back that are ahead of him. Darnell Mooney, Drake London, obviously, Ray McLeod, and Bijan Robinson ahead of him in targets. So I think it's a combination of Kirk looking elsewhere and maybe, Pitts, if he drops a couple balls, doesn't have the separation, do you then lose the faith a little bit of the quarterback and he'll look elsewhere?
I think it's one of those things like after a while, if it keeps happening like this, there's got to be something where it's, all right, this player is just not who we thought he was, because if he was, the team would be going out of their way to find him targets. I get Raheem saying, hey, we're not focused on getting guys stats, we're focused on wins, but he would be a bigger part of your game plan if the ability on the field matched all the ability that we've seen from him athletically. So I'm going to go Buccaneers on this game, Dad. Are you in the same boat?
Yeah, I'm going Buccaneers on this one as well. Yeah, I'm riding the Baker Mayfield train right now.
All right, we'll ride that Baker Mayfield train all the way to the station. Coming up next, we'll take a look at where the Davante Adams train heads next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. here. And yesterday, news broke that Davante Adams has requested a trade from the Raiders, and there is reportedly 2 teams at the top of his wish list that have quarterbacks that he has thrived with in the past. We're hearing the 2 teams are Jets and Saints. Of these 2, you guys, which is more likely? What do we think?
Dad, it seems like the real unsexy answer to this is all roads lead to the Jets. And we know, and we talked about it yesterday, what Jesse mentioned seemed like it was probably going to be a pretty important factor for a receiver making a move in the middle of a season at his age to want to have some familiarity with the quarterback he's working with. I can understand that, Dad, from like a human working level, having to go in on the fly during the season and learn a whole new book, like a book of tendencies on a quarterback that you're trying to form a relationship with the kind of pressure that would be on Davante Adams at this point, because being a mid-season acquisition in the form and fashion in which he's going to be, it's going to invite a lot of criticism. It's going to invite a lot of scrutiny for him coming off his tenure with the Las Vegas Raiders. And so I can get why the comfort of these situations where, hey, if you're the Jets, the way it's gone for New England so far, the way it's gone for the Dolphins with a hurt Tua right now, you can understand, hey, he feels like they've got a shot in that division to still make something of their season, despite what last weekend looked like. And for the Saints, we've talked about the NFC South is wide open this whole time. So I would like to see him in New Orleans, I think a little bit more, just because that division's more winnable, and thus it feels like there's a little higher ceiling there. With the Jets, I still have questions about if this can come together enough to make them a wild card team in the AFC, because I don't think they're going to best the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, you look at both teams are both led by the top 2 receivers on the teams are wide receivers. Well, the Jets, actually, Breece Hall is the second leading receiver with 18. Lazard has 16. Garrett Wilson has 20. Then Olave has 20, and Shaheed has 15. And then Alvin Kamara has 17. The next closest wide receiver, the third wide receiver on the Jets, is Mike Williams with 8. And the third wide receiver for New Orleans is Mason Tipton with 4. So they certainly both could use that. And I'm not saying that Davante Adams would be the third receiver, but a third, you know what I'm talking about. I would think the Jets would be a better fit because he goes in knowing the quarterback, played with Lazard as well, and knowing the system of Nathaniel Hackett. So, I mean, you're going in ready-made. You're basically hitting the ground running. I know the connection in New Orleans is Derek Carr, and that's one of the reasons he wanted to go to the Raiders was to play with his college teammate in Derek Carr. And that lasted for a year. But the more comfortable setting of knowledge of the offense would definitely be the Jets. He could just fit right in and start going. So I think either would be good. I think either would obviously help the team try and win their division or at least make the playoffs. So I think it's 6-1, half dozen the other. But I think as far as familiarity, the Jets, he could fit seamlessly into that system.
That is true, and I heard Dominique and Mina talking about this the other day. The Jets system is kind of a remnant of a bygone era that, remember Aaron Rodgers years ago when he was in Green Bay and you had the split between him and Mike McCarthy finally. And the one thing everyone said is, well, Mike McCarthy really didn't do anything to help Aaron Rodgers out with the scheme. It was what we see in Dallas right now. You go out there and you expect your great players to go and make plays. And we're like, oh, yeah, we'll get Aaron someone that'll actually help him do that. And they brought over Matt LaFleur, who does that at an incredibly high level. And Aaron Rodgers seemed resistant, so much so that now he's gone and recreated the old environment with the Jets in New York, where they don't do any of the stuff that you see in the Shanahan-McVay tree offenses. It's, hey, we're going to go out there. And Aaron's been on record of saying, I don't like things moving. I like to see it before the snap. I like everything stagnant, and we go. It's a high degree of difficulty. And so if you've got Davante Adams, who, hey, him and Aaron are used to throwing back shoulder fades and trying to do those one-on-one route works at the X, where, listen, having Garrett Wilson there too will help both of them. But you're right, Dad. They are used to a very specific brand of offense that is no longer common around the NFL.
It is old school, and it's weird to say old school because it's just a few years ago, but there isn't motion. You're right. Aaron Rodgers doesn't like motion. He doesn't like the defense moving. He likes the defense stagnant if they're going to disguise what they're going to disguise to without movement, and you don't get movement on defense when you don't have movement on offense. We know he likes taking the play clock down to the end and trying to get a free play. So, he runs a different style of offense. And like I said, I think Davante Adams would obviously fit right back into it. So that does seem like the move. It seems like the obvious move, which is probably the reason it won't happen.
Yes, exactly. So to that point, and I think it's worth repeating, and I saw this from Ian Rappaport and Mike Garafolo over the NFL Network, that while it seems like Davante Adams would like to play for the Jets or the Saints, he's not requested a specific team in the trade, and the Raiders have made it pretty clear that they're still going to go out there and make the best deal for the organization.
I mean, listen, Davante Adams could fit in on a number of teams. How about Washington? You have Terry McLaurin. How about Davante Adams and Terry McLaurin with the young quarterback? I mean, again, now Jaden hasn't been lighting it up passing-wise, but boy, oh boy, what an added weapon that would be for a team that's leading the NFC East right now. And as I talked with New Orleans and the Jets, they're deeper in the receiver position. You know, what about a team that's not as deep in a receiver position and is playing well, especially offensively? We know Washington is struggling defensively, but there are definitely more teams out there that could use the services of Davante Adams.
Oh, yeah, no, I want to be abundantly clear. Like, anyone would be happy to have, even at this point, 31 going on 32-year-old Davante Adams walk into their house and take off his shoes and get comfortable. There's no doubt about that. And I think Washington, I've heard more and more people bring their name up as, hey, they're a young, exciting offense right now in the NFL. And if you add that extra layer now of another weapon, maybe the passing numbers bump up because, again, Dad, some of that volume is, hey, you have been onboarding a rookie quarterback. And while it was used as sort of a knock against him saying you're running a quote-unquote simple college offense to start the season, part of that's the smart way to do it when you're trying to get a player comfortable and doing the things that he likes. Adding another player the caliber of Davante Adams could certainly, I think, allow you to diversify the portfolio a little bit there. So we'll wait and see. I'll be fascinated what the offer is going to look like. We know they're fishing for a second and other compensation are the Las Vegas Raiders. In return, our buddy Jason Fitz stopped by yesterday. He doesn't think this gets done because he doesn't think that the owner can wear the egg on his face of potentially seeing Davante Adams go and help another team succeed, especially in the middle of the season. They don't have to trade him. But again, to your point, Dad, already dealing with a hamstring injury. We'll see how long that lingers. And right now, you've got a coach that doesn't seem all that bought in on the player at this point. So having that sort of toxicity around your building at a critical juncture doesn't seem like it's making life good for anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like the better business decision. I know Jason doesn't think they'll trade him because Mark Davis doesn't want to have egg on his face, but so you're going to keep him on a Raider team that's going to be a Midland team at best and pay him $17 million this year when you can offload that, still be a Midland team and, and make a good business decision and get some assets back.
Yeah, I think ultimately, but again, this requires the hardest thing in sports, which is teams have to be honest about where they are in the process. And I've always said this applies to quarterbacks. We're watching New England right now. I think be honest with where they're at in the process. We don't have the guys up front right now or the offense to protect a rookie quarterback if we put him in there and we feel like we're going to break our new toy if we do so. Whereas other teams, they're just saying, hey, we'll throw him out there. We'll figure it out later on. We'll Bryce Young this situation and all hell is going to break loose. And so having that sense of, all right, hey, if we're the Raiders, we're not where we need to be right now as a team. We're not ready to be an offense that supports a Davante Adams. This applies a lot more to running backs. The Giants weren't ready to support Saquon Barkley. The Eagles in much better position to do so, and we've seen how the results go from there. So that'll be fascinating to watch, Dad. One of the other things that's fascinating to consider with all this would be adding this to the Jets' already big show to start the season, where every week we're reading body language, the relationship between the head coach and the quarterback, as this constant back and forth of trying to gauge the temperature inside that locker room. Aaron Rodgers did get asked about that because we've seen a couple of interesting sideline interactions. We had the podium after this last week where Aaron was asked about the snap count. And so understandably, people were going to wonder about his relationship with Robert Saleh. Here's what he had to say about that the other day.
Rob and I have a great relationship. We have since day one when I got here. We have, text message conversations, threads that we're in, conversations about a number of different topics outside of football. We got a good friendship. Yeah, he was interested in Egypt for sure.
The irony, he'd be texting him about the Egypt trip that launched all of this. And Dad, so Aaron Rodgers on McAfee saying that their relationship is fine. We have now, and again, we get a limited sliver of this from the outside. We talked to Thomas Morstead, the punter for the Jets, and he said He's seen how the New York media can blow up a lot of these things that might not be looked at the same way. And we talk about this all the time, Dad. People will see sideline blowups and interactions among players. Tom Brady for years getting into it with guys there, forgetting that that's sometimes just how you communicate on the sideline in the heat of battle, and then everyone's able to put that behind them and go on. Do you think that's the situation here with Aaron and Rob, or is there something more to this?
I mean, listen, we're not in there. We don't know, and I am with you. And for those that have played, to understand that any blow up on the sideline during a game is to really measure that blow up, because it is in the heat of the moment. It's if things happen in the practice field, in the locker room during the week, that you would kind of raise an eyebrow to when it's not the heat of the moment. I don't know about the relationship. You know, I don't know if Aaron is just saying everything's hunky-dory because that's the right thing to say. I mean, imagine if he said there wasn't a good relationship. I mean, the questions that would just keep going and going. We always talk about that. You're just writing now a check that other people are going to have to cash because everybody's asking about it. So it's better to just say everything's hunky-dory. But the bottom line is, and you said this, and this also isn't rocket science, these two are tied to one another. I mean, Jets went all in, and Saleh is part of that, and Aaron Rodgers is part of that. So if this thing blows up, everybody's losing their job, right? I mean, you go all in. You have pushed all your chips to the middle of any metaphor you want to use it to this, because if it doesn't work, everybody's in the unemployment line.
Well, and you think about how that usually manifests itself. Like, look at the New York Giants across the, hallway in MetLife there is a good example of this. And Brian Daboll, as he has come under fire, what have we seen? Him gripping the wheel a little bit tighter here. Some things with how they manage the offense. All of this stuff that usually happens, Dad. When a head coach is under fire, what do? Take over play calling, more involved in the day-to-day decisions. An offensive head coach is all of a sudden in the meeting room with quarterbacks again if he wasn't already, because their thought process and a very human response to this is, if I'm going to get fired, I'm going to get fired because of me, not because of what someone else does. And the difficult part for Robert Saleh is, once you invited Aaron Rodgers into the building, you're not in control anymore. This organization has shown we don't need to be in the locker room to see. The organization has done what Aaron Rodgers has wanted since he showed up there. And so we imagine that's going to be the MO until this continues. And that's got to be a bit unnerving. I'm sure the relationship is fine and cordial enough, but they don't have years of built-up trust between the two of them. And now, as Aaron Rodgers clearly stated at the podium that one day this offseason, I know if I don't perform, we're all getting fired. And Robert Saleh has to kind of go along for the ride on that and hope his defense can give that offense enough chances in the early going to get going.
Yeah, the comfort level is Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers, because they have the past relationship, and throw a Lazard into that, and maybe Davante Adams, and you have, Green Bay and New York. From an offensive standpoint, and all Robert Saleh can do is watch and hope that offense takes off and try and keep the defense up to a great level.
Yep, and so we saw this the other day, too. This is another one of those things where, Timo is trying to tell us that sometimes things get a little bit misrepresented here. There was, I saw Rich Cimini, I think, from the Jets tweeted out audio of Garrett Wilson on with Bart and Hahn in New York. And the quote and the takeaway was people saying, I don't think we do a lot of stuff on offense. But you listen to the segment, and Garrett Wilson was asked about, hey, do you guys, feel like you're trying to do too much as offense or haven't found the identity? And no, he said, I don't think we do a lot of stuff. It's about going out there and executing and figuring out if that's going to work. I don't think we're trying a lot of different things. And so he didn't say that as demeaning to an offense where right now him and Aaron still haven't necessarily gotten going that same way. But just the acknowledgement that their offense isn't about trying a bunch of different stuff.
Yes.
It's you have to go out there and execute at a really high level if you're Garrett Wilson, because the offense isn't going to help you do that.
He's exactly right how we broke it down. I mean, you line up and you run your route. The route tree isn't as extensive as a Shanahan or a McVay route tree. It is pretty basic. And it said, you're going to beat your guy, and we're going to have a quarterback that can get you the ball. That's basically what they're saying, and that's how they're running the offense.
We'll see if they have another guy to help them do that, and Davante Adams here sooner than later. Coming up next, we'll give you one more bet to keep your eye on for Thursday Night Football and take ahead of the impending next round of the MLB postseason here on GoJo and Golic. It's not going to rank. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. It's time for Better Yet, presented by Larceny Weeded Bourbon. Lock in a win and seize tonight. Bardstown, Kentucky, 46% alcohol by volume. Think wisely, drink wisely. We've got the Atlanta Falcons at home as 1.5-point favorites. So basically a pick 'em in the Dome coming up tonight. I like the Bucs to win this one outright based on the blitzing nature of Todd Bowles' defense. And I think that offense with Baker Mayfield and those great receivers going up against Jesse Bates in the safety room has enough to get over. But I think the points are low. Thursday nights tend to be sloppy. The over-under 43.5. Each of the Falcons' last 7 Thursday night games have gone under the points total. I think that continues as the Buccaneers get a win tonight. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield. We have got 3 of the next 4 matchups set coming up in the upcoming round of the MLB playoffs, but one looms for the remainder of Wild Card Weekend. For more on that now, and to help us out to take a look at that, Sean Casey, MLB Network analyst at the Mayor's Office on Twitter. You can catch him on MLB Network throughout the postseason, and check out the Mayor's Office podcast wherever you get it. Great reactions coming off all these great games that we're having. And Sean, we were just saying, what's better than a little bit of midweek afternoon baseball?
Nothing better. We were talking about it's like March Madness. Nothing better than that first round. You got a 2 o'clock game, 4 o'clock game, 6 o'clock game, 8 o'clock game. You could just sit down and watch baseball. So this is a great time of year for the baseball fans.
Oh, it absolutely is. And what? So we have 3 series that are over, 3 sweeps, 2 zip sweeps. What stood out to you the most in all of these sweeps?
I mean, I think, the way the Royals played, just not scoring a ton of runs, but like finding a way to beat the Orioles in those 2 games. I mean, the Orioles scored 1 run in 2 games. So I think that was a big one right there. How good the Padres are. The Padres are a good team, really good. I mean, the Braves obviously went kind of limping out there to San Diego, but, they really took it to them, the Braves. And I think, with the Braves losing there and the Padres, just look at that lineup, the lineup top to bottom. And also, too, how good Michael King was. Michael King in game 1, he was the big piece in the Juan Soto trade. And, that worked out good kind of for both sides. I mean, how good King was. And, you're looking right now at the Detroit Tigers, man. You got to love what they've done. In August, they were dead for rights, and they just went on a tear into the playoffs and got in towards the end there. And the way they took it to the Astros those first couple games was pretty impressive. And the one series that's still going with the Mets and the Brewers, and the Brewers did a great job of coming back last night to tie that series at 1-1 going to game 3. So it's been a great wild card round. I think this has been great for baseball, and we'll see what happens tonight with one more game to go.
Let's hone in and start with the Tigers. You mentioned they had a 10-year playoff drought that they ended. They got red hot towards the end of the season. What was the key to the turnaround for them this year that's now allowed them to get through to this next round?
I think that young team, they're so young, and there's so many, Riley Green in the middle of that lineup, Torkelson coming back and doing well, Colt Keith's done well, Carpenter in the middle of the lineup, and obviously Tarek Skubal is going to win the Cy Young in the American League. So you have a horse like that in your rotation. I mean, that's such a huge thing. And I think A.J. Hinch has done a great job as a manager. I mean, he's the one guy. That bullpen has been used more than any bullpen in baseball. And you saw in game 2, I mean, it was basically a bullpen game. They used seven pitchers, and AJ's just done a great job of mixing and matching and putting guys in certain situations. So I think for the Tigers, they made the run when they had to make it. They're a young team. They're vibrant. There's a lot of enthusiasm there. They're fired up to be around each other. Parker Meadows is another guy too. So it's just a fun young team to watch right now, and they're riding the wave.
You were with Detroit for a short time of your career, and we see what the Lions have done. And what does it mean to that city to have now the Tigers, moving on in the postseason?
Oh, man, the Motor City. Listen, when you see the Lions doing what they're doing, you saw the fans coming out. They're the greatest fans in the world. And when I was there in 2006 in the World Series, I mean, I'd never experienced enthusiasm and jubilation like they bring. I mean, it's a blue-collar city. They love their sports teams. And when you're winning in Detroit, there's no better place to be. Those are some of the fondest memories I have of that run we had in 2006 at the World Series. And I think the biggest reason was how crazy that city was going, how excited they are. I'm so excited to see the division series going to Detroit and to see what those players are in for a real treat to see what those fans do in the postseason.
A.J. Hinch said, we want this team to embody this city and win with that kind of grit. And so far, you mentioned that youthful energy and that grit have certainly shown up for that group. Brief obit on the team they took down. I mean, the Astros not making it to the ALCS for the first time in 7 years. We know they've drawn the ire of a lot of people in baseball over the last number of seasons and kind of struggled to get off starting this season. What do you see for the future of the Astros? This has been the team that's been one of the standard bearers in the American League for a while now.
Well, I think that's the thing. They have been the standard. I mean, they just missed going to their 8th consecutive NLC. Well, they went to 8 consecutive NLCSs. They're obviously not going to do that this year. But, the Astros started off, you're right, so slow at the beginning of the year where we were thinking, is this the year they don't make the postseason? But they find a way. I mean, that pitching is really good what they have. And Framber Valdez at the top there and Hunter Brown, all those guys, there's so many good pitchers that they have. I think that's the big thing with the Astros. Now, the big question is, Bregman's a free agent. Does he come back? Tucker's going to be a free agent after next year. They definitely have some questions. Is Verlander going to come back? Is he done? There's definitely some questions there with the Astros. But one thing about the Astros, they always find a way to get it done, and they did it again this year. Although they didn't move past the wild card round, they found a way to get to the postseason.
Although it's been a few years since the sign stealing situation, are they still kind of hated for that?
You know what? I feel like they've moved on because they've won a title. Dusty Baker won his first title with them. I feel like we've kind of moved on, but if you're certain teams like the Yankees or the Dodgers or teams that were involved during that time, I think you're good. You always hear Altuve and a few of those guys getting booed at those stadiums a lot.
Yeah, no, and based on some of the fan response when I asked about this on Twitter, there are some people that are so – I mean, people love to get mad and people love to hate on it. And listen, we saw this last year in college football. We cover. Once you introduce sign stealing into it and we've got documented cheating, it changes the game for a lot of people. So the Astros will get to worry about all that next year. Like you said, some things hanging up in the air for that team. What about in another series? You talked about the Braves. Was this just a case of they were too beat up to make it to the places they wanted to go as a team this year?
I think so. I mean, they did a great job. The fact that they made the playoffs, losing Strider, Acuna for most of the year, Austin Riley down the stretch, Albies was out for most of the season, Michael Harris was banged up a little bit too. Spencer Strider, who was, up for, they thought he might be the leading Cy Young candidate. He goes down early. And then I think at the end here, you really had to burn Schwellenbach to get in that last series with the Mets. And then Chris Sale goes down with those back spasms. I think that was the nail in the coffin right there. As soon as you went out to San Diego and you saw that Chris Sale wasn't going to be one of your guys, I think that's where I just thought, man, the Padres are too good of a team. The pitching's too thin right now. The lineup's too thin. And, I just think they ran out of gas at the end of the day.
So you have 3 sweeps. Detroit now plays at Cleveland, Kansas City at the Yankees, and San Diego at the Dodgers. By the way, San Diego 8-5 against the Dodgers in the regular season this year. I don't know if that leans the answer this way, but which of these wild card teams has the best chance to beat a division winner?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, when you look at those series, I think I really like the Padres a lot. I like the way they're playing. I feel like they almost caught the Dodgers in the division at the end. They had a chance. They were 3 back in LA, and I believe they got that first game, and they were 2 back, and they just couldn't do it. But that's going to be a heavyweight bout. I mean, that's going to be 2 juggernauts, coming at it. So I think the Padres actually have a really good shot to beat the Dodgers in that first round. That's going to be a great one to see. And the other matchups are great too. I'm going to be interested. It's going to be interesting to see, Mike, how the layoff is. We've seen it in the past years with the layoff of these teams not playing for 6 days. The Guardians, LA, and the Yankees not playing for 6 days. So I'm going to be interested to see what that looks like, and does it take a toll in your rhythm and timing, having that many days off.
You mentioned one of the teams that's dealing with that layoff there in the New York Yankees, and I saw, our former teammate Alan Hahn over at ESPN in New York say, hey, no Orioles, no Astros, no excuses now, as a lot of the chief competition for them in the American League now going to be at home watching them in this series. I don't feel like we've talked enough about the Yankees and the season they've had relative to the Dodgers. How much pressure is on this team now to go out here and capture this given what's laid out in front of them?
I mean, I think there's always pressure in New York. I mean, I was fortunate enough to feel the pressure last year. Was with the Yankees as the hitting coach for the second half. So it was good to kind of see the standards are different in New York, especially with the Yankees. I mean, it's really World Series or bust. So, when you look at the Yankees, they have the team to win it all this year. They really do. I mean, that lineup with Soto coming into that lineup, the Jazz Chisholm trade. I mean, Judge is the best player, I think the best player in the league. There's no doubt about it. Obviously him and Ohtani, but what Judge does is so special. The emergence of Austin Wells, Volpe, there's so many good players in that lineup, but I think that rotation, Rodon has had a nice year. Garrett Cole's back and he's settled in. Clark Schmidt, they're deeper in the bullpen. They have it settled there. So there's a lot of pressure on the Yankees at the end of the day. They didn't make the postseason last year, but, there was a chip on their shoulder all year long. They played some great baseball. And, when you look at that team, they think they have the team to win it all. And come Saturday, we're going to see what they got game 1.
Is the most pressure on the Dodgers, though? Getting Shohei and building the team that they built, that if they don't win it all, it's the biggest disappointment?
You're spending $1 billion for 2 players in the offseason? Yeah, I think no big deal, right? We have that in our couch cushions, But, I think so. I mean, I think the most pressure's got to be on the Dodgers, right? You bring Shohei in for $700 million. You bring in Yamamoto for over $300 million. They have such depth there, obviously, with Freeman and Betts in that lineup and a lot of other great players that they got, up and down that lineup that can beat you with one swing of the bat. I'd have to think with the money they spent, Mike, I'd think the most pressure is no doubt on the Dodgers.
All right, well, as we get ready for that round and looking forward here, let's focus. We do have one more wild card game coming up, as you mentioned, between the Mets and the Brewers here. Who do you like in this one? What do you think's the deciding factor in this series after Milwaukee was able to even it up last night?
Wow, you know what? I love that it's 1-1. You know, sometimes with the sweeps, you're like, oh man, you want to see the drama. So I love that it's 1-1. They're so evenly paired. I mean, these matchups, the lineups are match up well. The rotations match up well. You know, I think it's going to come down to who gets the big hit. You know, at the end of the day, when you look at the series in the postseason, you know, these are the best pitching staffs in the league. And when you're playing postseason baseball, and it always comes down to the big hit. So, you know, when I look at this, who's going to get the big hit tonight? You know, who's going to get the big swing of the bat? And I think we haven't seen Francisco Lindor maybe get hot in this series yet. Maybe he's the one that comes up with the big hit tonight. Who knows?
Which team, the Brewers or the Mets, is better built to take on and possibly beat the Phillies, their next round opponent?
Wow, that's a great question. You know what? When I look at the teams, I think when you look at the Brewers in that bullpen, I mean, they got a good bullpen. I'd say with the starters that the Mets have and the history that they have, you know, especially with the way Manaea has been pitching, Severino and Peterson, I have to feel like the Mets line up better against the Phillies, you know, in that head-to-head matchup.
All right, we're going to see what Grimace and the boys have going forward here in the MLB postseason. Going to be exciting to watch. Everyone, make sure you check out Sean on the MLB Network throughout this postseason. The Mayor's Office, again, awesome post-game reactions and plenty of great breakdowns as we roll along with one of the most exciting postseasons in sport. Sean, can't thank you enough for the time today, man. Appreciate it. Hopefully we'll talk to you again soon, all right?
All right, fellas. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Sean.
No, definitely.
It's a great nickname. It's a great nickname, the Mayor, that he had.
I know. It's always one of those things you and I talk about. And like, obviously, GoJo, which is my likeness on the show now, is technically a nickname. It's the only one I've ever had in my life. And you never got close to one, did you?
Never had a nickname. Not at least one that I could repeat on air that teammates would call me at times. But nothing, no. I mean, the Mayor's a cool one. The Mayor.
The Mayor is
a good one.
Yeah.
I like it.
Oh, it commands authority. It's not a high enough office to where you got to worry about too much responsibility, but you're still the mayor. Like, you command enough respect in the local community here that you're given all that. I wonder how you come by that nickname, because the only other one I've gotten, quite honestly, and shout out to our friend Dominique Foxworth, we referenced a couple times on this show. I'll never forget one of my earliest appearances filling in for you and Greeny on Mike and Mike. It was, I think, me, Ian Fitzsimmons, Dominique Foxworth, and Ryan Clark. And it was something being discussed. It might have been Colin Kaepernick taking a knee or something that certainly had a racial component to it. And I was sitting in between Ryan and Dominique. And as I got ready to speak as like a 25 or a 26-year-old, Dominique could see me tiptoeing towards like getting ready to speak in the line. And he just looked over. He held like the mom hand out like you give in the driver's seat of a car to the passenger. And he goes, "Don't worry, Creamy. We got this one." And I, to this day, will, one, never let him live that down, but two, always cherish Creamy as the one other nickname I've received in my life.
Creamy. That's a good one. I do like that.
And Creamy could definitely apply to both of us here for all of the obvious reasons. So whether it's Creamy or the Mayor, thank you to Sean Casey for stopping by and helping us out. Taking a look at the MLB postseason. Coming up next, let's head back to football. Before the season, DraftKings asked me to power rank all 32 teams in the NFL. Coming up next, I will give you the current top 10 as we look through the first quarter of the NFL season here on GoJo and Golic. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Because I am a sucker and a glutton for punishment and like the internet getting mad at me, I agreed to do NFL power rankings before the season for our friends at the DraftKings Sportsbook on their main account. To no surprise, everyone agreed with me. I was absolutely right, and I've been flawless in my approach to this. Looking back at it now, it's interesting. I had the Chiefs unsurprisingly at number 1, followed by the 49ers at 2. The Lions at 3, and then the Ravens, Bills, and Texans going on down through the top 6 there, Dad. And, the Bengals, a team that's aged poorly at number 7. The Cowboys and Eagles at 9 and 10, certainly been tough to get off the ground there. But overall, that was kind of what we expected going into this season. So I thought I would do a little update of the power rankings, Dad, and I want you and, of course, everyone at GoJo and Golic to tell me what you think of this right now. As we sit here on October 3rd, we are 4 weeks into the NFL season right now. This is what I've got here, and I'm basing it off where we're at here and now. Those preseason rankings were about projecting what I think was going to happen. These are about where we are currently in the NFL right now. So we've got 2 undefeated teams in the NFL. I'm going to start off with the Vikings. I think they're playing the best football of anyone in the NFL right now on both sides of the ball. We mentioned one of 3 teams in the NFL in the top 10 of EPA per play on offense and on defense. Their defense second in the NFL in that metric and in many what Brian Flores has put together on that side of the ball. But they are also, and I think of these teams that we're talking about in the top range, Dad, one of the healthier groups. Obviously, J.J. McCarthy injured before the season, but getting Jordan Addison back, we saw what that meant for that team, the defense and what that unit has done so far. I think them at number 1, followed by the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bills, and the Lions would round out my top 5 currently in the NFL. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think, you would take the 2 undefeated teams first, and I think Minnesota's playing better than Kansas City right now. They're more healthy than Kansas City. They're playing better both offensively and defensively. As a team, they're playing better than Kansas City, even though Kansas City is still undefeated with all the foibles we keep talking about with them. So I completely agree Minnesota should be number 1 and Kansas City 2. And the Ravens over the Bills. I know the Ravens have 2 losses. The Bills have 1, but go on head-to-head, and the Ravens just smoked Buffalo badly in Baltimore. So I definitely agree with the Ravens number 3. Bills and Lions, I could live with. I could flip-flop. I could have lived with the Bills 4 and the Lions 5, but I could definitely live with the Bills 4 and the Lions 5. San Francisco dealing with the injuries, being 6. I know you want to go through the rest of your top 10.
Yeah, so 6 through 10, I had San Francisco and Seattle, both in the NFC West, followed by Houston and then Pittsburgh, 3-1 division leaders. And then I had the Washington Commanders at 10 right now, 3-1 leading the NFC East. Like, again, it's where they're at now. And I look at a Philadelphia Eagles team that's dealing with a bit of an identity issue, plenty of injury at wide receiver and along their offensive line that's really subverted a lot of their success. The Dallas Cowboys, we know, have a ton to worry about on that front, with Micah Parsons set to miss his first game in his NFL career, DeMarcus Lawrence already on IR, for a defense that struggled to do anything in the run game, now might have issues all of a sudden getting after the passer in a way that we've taken for granted for a while with them. So I have a hard time putting either of those teams above what we've seen Washington do, despite the fact that I get it. Their defense has been really, really rough so far. Offensively, they've been able to carry the load, and I think that's why right now I would look at them and have them rounding out that top 10. Pittsburgh's going to be a tough one for me. I'll see with them. The defense has been so great so early that I've got to give them their respect, even if we saw a little bit of the crack start to show for the offense last week.
So in your initial top 10, you had Cincinnati, Green Bay, the Cowboys, and Philly, and they were replaced by Minnesota, Seattle, Pittsburgh, and Washington. The one thing I'll say, and I was going through your list, I didn't catch some of what you said. What about Tampa Bay?
I have maybe I'm still holding on to borrowed feelings for the NFC South, but I still look at them and kind of downgrade that whole division. Maybe it's wrong in my head. Them and Green Bay were the ones I had the toughest time with in the NFC, because Green Bay, I think, deserves a lot of credit for coming out 2-2 despite losing Jordan Love after the first game of the season and what they were able to do the last couple of games with Malik Willis. I think they'll be the most rapid risers here soon, as we saw Jordan Love come back and have a career day, albeit after being down big. They kind of had to, like Georgia in the second half this last weekend, go all gas, no brakes once you're in the hole like 28-0. But I think they're in prime position to rise pretty quickly, and Tampa Bay would probably be OLI on this one, just in the outside looking in.
Yeah, Green Bay I could see outside the top 10. I mean, you have the 2-2. Your 2 wins are with your backup quarterback. Your 2 losses are with your starter. So that seems a bit odd. But that would be the only thing I would say is possibly putting Tampa Bay ahead of either Pittsburgh or Washington. I would imagine if you went top 15, 11 would be Tampa Bay, would it not? Or would it be Green Bay? But I think I could see Tampa Bay being in the top 10 and either Pittsburgh or Washington being on the outside looking in.
They'd certainly be right in that range. At GoJo and Golic on Twitter, obviously, is where you can let me have it for that, Dad. But I think looking at the top 5 of this, the Bills and the Lions, that range between them and the Ravens is kind of where I have the toughest time right now. Just because for the Detroit Lions, we're coming off a game where their quarterback had a perfect game. He went 18 for 18, and the running game in the last couple of weeks has started to steady and look more like itself. Now, long-term, Frank Ragnow and that injury at center and how they've had to reshuffle that group against top-flight competition. Because remember, with Seattle, they weren't in a position to really stress them on the interior for that loss because they were down Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, a bunch of guys in that front 7 overall that were going to leave them shorthanded in an area where, quite honestly, Seattle, that's not the calling card for their defense just yet anyway, outside of Leonard Williams. I am curious to see as they go through the rest of their schedule if they do encounter teams with better defensive lines now that you've had to both reshuffle that interior. You lost one of your starting guards last year to free agency already. That offensive line is the star for the show in Detroit, and now that group is starting to show some of those signs of wear and tear in a way that I just want to see against top-flight competition on a continued basis.
So, and speaking of Detroit, you know me, I'm not into the statistics as much as other, whether it be next-gen stats or just statistics.
Are you saying stats are for losers?
Stats are for losers. Me and Raheem Morris.
Senior, is that because you're having a hard time finding the stats on the website?
Well, yeah, that's partly it. Yeah, okay. That's the next-gen stats breakdown. I mean, my God, I need such guidance going through that. So, yes, Jesse, thank you for bringing that up. That is one issue. But here's another that I think you'll even understand, Jesse. Jared Goff, the perfect rating for a quarterback is 158.3, correct? How we got to that number, A, I have no idea. Let's start there. B, Jared Goff goes 18 for 18, has 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. And his rating is 155.8. What do you do to need a perfect rating? He didn't have a completion. He threw 2 touchdowns, didn't throw an interception. What more could he do to not have a perfect rating? So that's why I kind of poo-poo stats at times. I don't understand it. And I know there's a formula. and blah, blah, blah. But the formula doesn't work for me, okay? He's 18 for 18, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. You should have a perfect rating.
You feel better now that you got that off your chest? You attacked the...
Well, tell me, am I wrong?
No, the math isn't
Am I wrong?
The math is not mathing.
The math is not mathing.
I'm sure it has something to do with, where all these passes are attempted, yards per attempt, all those things in there. Is yours at Mike Golic on Twitter? At Golic? Did you just get the single name?
Golic. At Golic. Thanks for following. At Golic.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, follow for quote tweets and retweets, but if someone wants to explain to my father exactly how the quarterback ratings work out here, because you're right, sometimes I think the dissonance that for normal people and then the people that are more well-versed in that is something that needs to be explained. And honestly, shout out to Jared Goff, because in that game, Jared Goff is many things. A mobile quarterback is certainly not one of them. He's a guy that on play action over the middle is an absolute menace. And when he's pressured, usually is a nightmare scenario. Dad, this last weekend, Jared Goff, by his standards, looked like Mike freaking Vick out there, evading some pressure. He had the full pirouette into a pass that he completed in the pocket, one of 18 passes he completed in the pocket. So I will say that's going to be important, I think, as we talk about that offensive line going forward, is how Jared Goff is able to continue to respond to pressure, because I think there's going to be more of it this year than they're used to, just based on the nature of changing some of that line. And in the past, it's been not great. It's been kind of like watching late-stage Mannings where, hey, when someone gets by them and blows a little bit too hard, all of a sudden they're going to go down. So I have questions about that, but he answered them in a big way against the Seahawks.
Yeah, it was the most sacks they gave up. They gave up 2, none, 2, and then 3. Maybe it cost him the perfect rating. He had 2 carries for -2 yards, obviously being sacked. But that shouldn't be held against him. If an old lineman was beaten, or maybe he held on to the ball too long. I don't know. But as Jesse says, the math isn't mathing. And I just want an explanation. Jesse, are you on my side on this one?
I'm 100% on your side, Senior. 100%.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm bad at
The
math
other side
anyway,
is
but
there you go. Dad is an angry Simpsons character, upset with God, the sky, and nerds for making all this happen.
Yep.
Dad, speaking of, I guess, the opposite of nerds, the Baltimore Ravens, they feel like you know, it's funny because they have a lot of like really talented nerds employed there and take that very seriously. But when we see John Harbaugh on the sideline, John with his quarterback talking about, do you want to go for it, a backfield that includes Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, it feels very anti-nerd, even though they're actually not. But Dad, for this Baltimore team, they're another one. We know their record, obviously, through the first 4 weeks. While that's a part of the equation, we've seen how close they've been in all these football games. The shoe size game with the Kansas City Chiefs, an insane fourth quarter comeback by the Raiders to lose in that game. But since then, as they have been more dutiful with the run game that served them well last year and got the addition of the human battering ram Derrick Henry, that offense has looked pretty unassailable. You could still ask for more out of the receiving. We haven't seen Mark Andrews come fully online again. Really bad drop in this last game as they're struggling to get him integrated into the offense. And Isaiah Likely, even after the monster game 1 against Kansas City, really hasn't looked like that since. So the area we're used to seeing production out of this team hasn't really materialized that. And Dad, that to me is almost scarier for this offense, because I don't know if I'm betting on the long term. I'm not betting that those 2 players in particular continue to lack production the way they have so far.
Yeah, it's been basically Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and another wide receiver getting the job done, because you're right, Andrews had a tough drop in that one. But I guess when you can, we can run the ball the way you run it. I mean, their next 2 opponents are the Bengals and the Commanders, both who struggle on defense. So I would imagine you're going to get a heavy dose of Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson just running it. Do what you do best. They're the number 1 running, averaging 220. They went into the weekend second at 203 yards a game. I think they're up to 220 yards a game rushing. Do what you do best. And that's going to be run the ball and the pass. It's just truly one of the teams where the pass is definitely set up by the run. And I think defensively, now Michael Pierce was out the last game, the big nose tackle for them. That certainly can hurt him on the running attack. As I talked about on this show and during the game, they've given up explosive passing plays, which they're going to need to certainly quell. But that running attack, I mean, that when you're getting ready to play them, it's not a whole lot about scheme. If you're a part of the front 7, it is about beating the man in front of you and then tackling either Lamar Jackson or Derrick Henry. There is nothing cute about it. There's nothing fancy about it. It is just straight ahead, smash mouth football.
Guys, I just want to jump in really quick because, Senior, we actually have an answer for why Jared Goff did not get a perfect passer rating. So we'll pull up this tweet right here that is going to explain the situation to you. So basically, the stat that prevented him from receiving the perfect rating was percentage of touchdown passes per passing attempt. The minimum for passer rating perfection is 11.9%, and he came up short at 11.1%. You hate to see it.
Hate when that happens, stupid. Don't you, Dad?
It is stupid.
That's stupid. Mm-hmm. It's stupid. That's all. You know what? I would quote tweet that and say it's stupid.
You can do that. In fact, on Twitter.
I was going to say, did you just verbal a tweet for us instead of doing it yourself?
I did, because I don't know where that tweet came from, and I don't want to look it up on my phone. Maybe I'll have your mother quote tweet it for me, something. But yeah, that's my quote tweet. That's stupid. It's stupid.
We are an incredibly social media savvy bunch who understands modern technology and the world we exist in now. We'll check out some sound bites from NBA Media Days next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Sr., Mike Golic Jr., and Jesse Cofield here with you. We are gearing up for the NBA season, which means media days have come and gone. So let's take a listen to some sounds from teams that have a lot of eyes on them this year. So we start in Golden State, where Steph Curry had something to say about the failed offseason pursuit of some big names.
I think we're in that position where we can be a relevant team early and give ourselves a chance to compete, and then assess where we are, because that's what every team has to go through. We just have the shadow of, to your point, like the expectations that we're supposed to be in that conversation. I want to win, and I know everybody in the locker room wants to do their part to help make it happen. So that's how we're approaching the season.
So the front office lost out on some big names, lost out on Clay, and, seems like there's a lot of pressure on Curry to perform this year.
Yeah, for a guy that said, and it's weird, we get a little bit of cognitive dissonance in this because we see the sentiment that Steph Curry wants to, retire and stay a Golden State Warrior. But, Dad, it's also kind of sounding like Giannis Antetokounmpo constantly threatening the Milwaukee Bucks with but I also want to win championships. And if that ever doesn't align, then I'd have to think through something here. An interesting response from Golden State to really go out here and surround him with nothing. So much so that Steve Kerr came out and basically said every position on the team is up for grabs outside of Steph's going into training camp this year. So they're hoping that kind of competition in the environment they've fostered around there ends up breeding some results. But that's a hope and a prayer for a team who's used to being the dynasty.
Oh, without question. And losing Clay, he was the second leading scorer on the team behind Steph, but he had one of his worst three-point shooting percentages of his career. I think it's second worst of his career. And then missing out on Markkanen and Paul George. I mean, they were a play-in team. I mean, I don't see it getting better. And this was a team that, you know, the basketball cap and tax luxury tax situation are to me anyway, incredibly complicated. And they were spending a ton of money, and you know what? It paid off. They got a lot of championships, so it makes it all worth it. But it's going to, I think, take a bit for them to build back up again in the time Steph Curry has left.
Yeah, it's uncharted territory for them right now. Like, we knew the end was coming with Klay Thompson last year, but to finally go out and see what a Warriors team looks like without him around there at all, and now over with the Dallas Mavericks, who are counting on him to be more of the, you know, version. And Klay was kind of the victim in the last couple of years of like a well-timed or a poorly timed bad month that underscored a guy that still, when he gets hot, can be a shooter. And in a place like Dallas now, being able to lean on Luka, being able to lean on Kyrie as more of the mainstays, they're the way that he could lean on Steph Curry in Golden State, I think gives them a shot to at least recoup as much as they're possibly going to. He's not going to be the defender anymore. Too many lower body injuries in the same time to be able to do that. But I think it makes the task of replacing it pretty difficult for a Golden State team, Dad, that's staring at a Western Conference that got pretty big and bad in its wake. It's the rising tide lifts all ships sort of thing, where you looked around the West and now all of a sudden you've had a bunch of these young teams like Minnesota, like Oklahoma City, all start to pop up around them, and that's before we get to San Antonio and what could be lurking there this season if now all of a sudden Chris Paul helps unlock the best of Wemby going into this year. So we've got that on one side. Jesse, let's head to the East, though. The Milwaukee Bucks are a fascinating team going to start this season.
Yeah, they're coming off a tumultuous year, you know, acquiring Damian Lillard just before training camp, firing Adrian Griffin midseason, losing Giannis to injury before the playoffs, falling to the Pacers in the first round. But Dame says it's all on the up and up from here, especially for him.
You know, my teammates and my coaches, they're going to get the real version of me this year. And I think that's without putting expectations on myself. I just know what type of year I had, and I know what type of summer I had and preparation I had, and they're going to get the real version of me. And that's really all I can say.
Guys, I also saw something from Media Day from Giannis saying that, like, he and Dame talked on the phone a lot, but they didn't actually practice together at all in the offseason. So maybe leaving some fans scratching their heads a little bit.
Yeah, Dad, that'll be interesting. And, like, the Bucks already making noise. I saw they weren't involved in the NBA's Christmas Day slate, which they took personally. That's usually a showcase of the league's best team. And you look for Dame in particular, Dad. We heard a lot of the, like, qualitative stuff last year with Dame, right? How, hey, he's away from his family in Milwaukee, struggling with that transition of being with a new organization for the first time in his whole career. And then they make the change to Doc Rivers, where you've got a coach that openly said, I wouldn't wish this on anyone, the way he talked about having to coach that team. And so Dame's points per game dropped by almost 8 points from last year, which you'd expect going to a team where he's not the mainstay. But I do think for this Milwaukee Bucks outfit, that year of continuity we see matters in a lot of teams that bring over these star players. And so I do expect this group to be much improved if they can stay healthy, which we know has been difficult, especially for Chris Middleton, who's an incredibly, I think, I don't know if he's underrated at this point, but it feels underrated in the way we talk about his importance to that team.
I know I kept giving them the benefit of the doubt when Dame and Giannis and Middleton would play together. Things would be different, but they never got to play together enough. And now you just wonder if they've gotten past. They certainly gotten past by the Celtics, who won the title, but the Knicks, you know, in the 76ers now getting Paul George, you know, you wonder where Milwaukee fits, the Cavaliers. I think Milwaukee's ahead of them, but you wonder where do they fit in the, I think third or fourth, right now, preseason, looking at it. And that's if those guys are all healthy and dependent on staying healthy. But you wonder if the time has passed for Milwaukee.
Yeah, I mean, Giannis is 29 years old, so firmly in the prime of his career right now, or should be that, 27, 28, 29-year-old range for a guy who's still uber talented. But that's another one, Dad, where you look at now the Boston Celtics, especially if they've unlocked what we believe they might have coming off a championship run. We know they're going to have to wait a while to get Kristaps back in the middle of that lineup, but that's still a team right now that they're going to be looking up at that's probably in the middle of the run of what Milwaukee thought they were going to be coming off their championship after the bubble.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it comes down to health of the big three together. But I think the Knicks, in getting Cat, whatever thought process people have about that, he's going to help in the middle and certainly shooting from 3-point land. And I do think the 76ers could jettison right up there with Paul George and with Embiid losing the weight that he lost. And again, the key for him, knock on wood, is staying healthy.
Yep, going to be fascinating to watch if they're able to do that. And we know health is the big factor for every team here, but having that continuity, because that's been the thing that these Bucs have been so robbed of, is going to be huge going into this year. Hopefully Doc has a little more fun this time around. Let's look at one of the teams that they're going to be going up and trying to get. Oh, actually, you know what? We don't have a lot of time here. I will say, though, one of their, not to get to this sound, but to get to this team, Dad, the 76ers, another fascinating team in the midst of all this, kind of a similar conversation where we're now expecting the 76ers to do what the Milwaukee Bucks could not. Integrate a superstar player on the fly in the midst of a season where you feel like the clock is ticking on your big man, even though Joel Embiid showing up slim and trim to training camp.
Yeah, and again, he's talking about losing even more weight, and it's all in the effort to stay healthy and stay in the best shape he can during the season, obviously for the postseason. But, to not have, he missed a lot of time and they dropped from like third to seventh. Now, Paul George could certainly stop the negative flow if Embiid were to get hurt. But I think they're set up really, really well this year to challenge at the top of the East.
Yeah, I would agree. I do just worry because all of the recent history that we've seen points to and says this is harder than we're giving it credit for, even if you've got a legitimate superstar and MVP caliber player in Joel Embiid and what Tyrese Maxey's become to that team. It still takes a little while to learn everyone. And if you're doing that with that ever-looming threat of injury that was a part of Paul George's tenure with the Clippers and certainly has been the story late in the season more so than early for the 76ers and Joel Embiid, I just have some doubts in the back of my mind that this group can come together in the way that we're giving credit for this year. I hope that they can because it makes the East really interesting, but past has not really given us a lot of reasons to believe that that is possible. Coming up next, we'll look towards a bright, shining future. A world where dreams become reality. The Krabby Patty actually available? All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, the third. 3 quick stories to send you to the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. If you have to miss us live or any of our great guests, shout out to Claudia Bellofatto, our DraftKings analyst that you can catch on the PreGame PowerUp tonight at 6 o'clock Eastern with Trey Wingo, Marshall Newhouse, and our buddy Emerson Latzia. And Sean Casey, former MLBer and an MLB Network analyst, for helping us break down the postseason that we've seen so far through the wild card round. You missed that? Check it out wherever you get our podcasts or right here as soon as we get done on YouTube. Guys, let's start off and get real hungry. A weird controversy surrounding Crumble Cookie's trip to Sydney, Australia has gone viral for all the wrong reasons. Crumble Cookies, for anyone unfamiliar, a popular cookie chain based out of Utah that has gone viral because of a demand in Sydney, Australia. And so you can imagine people were excited when it was announced that, there was going to be a Crumble Cookie pop-up in Australia. The organizers actually had no affiliation with Crumble Cookie. However, they flew to the United States, Dad, bought hundreds of Crumble Cookies, and then returned to Australia to sell them at a marked up price. They were stale and underwhelming for the people there who thought they were going to get the actual Crumble product here. So I appreciate the hustle to an extent, but this seems like these people have an extensive legal battle on their way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the legalities of it, but to fly from Australia to the U.S., we know how long that is, to buy cookies, turn around, and then start a pop-up shop that's not affiliated with Crumble Cookie and sell them for $17 Australian money a piece, $12 U.S. I just wonder, Jesse, is the profit worth the price of the ticket? I mean,
they sold them for like $17.50 a cookie, and apparently the math that they made a profit even after they flew to the U.S. to get the cookies and flew back.
That's insane to think about, but again, on the other side of this now, because while their defense is they never claimed to be an official Crumble store and that their bio and all this stuff, like, they used the marks. And so if you use the marks, anyone who's ever read a contract for any of these things knows there's probably going to be some recourse to this. And so, I don't see this working out all for well. I'm with you. I don't think the juice is at all worth the squeeze, Jesse.
But you guys, Crumble released a statement in response to this, and they said, like, wow, the pop-up wasn't sponsored by Crumble. We love seeing the excitement, and we, look forward to expanding. So maybe they didn't do anything technically illegal.
Yeah, well, or Crumble doesn't care. Crumble got free marketing in Australia between, with all the social media hype. Now, the problem is if the cookies were stale and they didn't taste their best, because I read one tweet saying the funniest thing is that Crumble honestly isn't even that good, by far the worst cookie I've ever had. That's BS. Crumble cookies are fantastic. They are fantastic. So much so I, tried to buy a store and couldn't. And I don't know how stale they got flying from from America to Australia. I don't know how much that affected the taste of the cookie. But man, I think they're great, and they've gotten kind of into cakes now as well. I love them.
Yeah, they have preoccupied my family's group chat. Jesse, I'm not going to be surprised here if you haven't had a Crumble cookie.
Oh, I've had one.
Haven't had one.
No, I've had a Crumble cookie.
Wow, all right. I did not think that.
That sounds underwhelming.
I'm more of a Levain girly, but
hey, you ain't gonna get no bad words about Levain coming out of my mouth here. I am God's strongest soldier every time I am able to drive by either of those stores and not go in and immediately nuke my diet for the sake of those great cookies. So shout out to Crumble, and I guess the folks in Sydney, they got away with this. We'll see. I hope the people in Australia get the more authentic Crumble experience sometime soon. But Jesse, let's get to the logical conclusion of this, from cookie tracking to poop tracking.
Yeah, a guy's going viral on Twitter for logging his numbers for poop. It's just the 2024 poop tracker. So he goes through by month and states how many poops he had that month. And apparently this is going off. Is this a thing? Because I've never heard of it before.
I have not heard of tracking your poops. He has it tracked through September. The high month for him was May, where he pooped 57 times. The low month was April, where he pooped just 34 times. So 23 fewer from April to May, back-to-back months there. So that's interesting. I don't know if the diet changed in May or what. But Jesse, no, I don't think it's a popular thing to keep track on social media, but I certainly know how many times I poop a day.
Are you supposed to be pooping multiple times a day? Like, is something wrong with you guys?
I think that's just a healthy diet and being regular and, probably at times testing the limits of the stomach a little bit too much. I think those all go hand in hand. I never tracked poops. I had a teammate that used to record farts. He had probably 120 farts recorded on his phone at any given time that he could pull up for us to listen to. And to my knowledge, they were all homegrown, farm to table. Those weren't outsourced farts. You didn't have to worry about any chemicals in those. And so I did appreciate that portion of the experience for guys, and just the fact that someone cares enough about their body to try and make sure, hey, did I have an off month? Maybe, you know what? Maybe this is part of a dietary thing. When you're getting ready to try and go on a new diet, a lot of times logging your meals is a good way to go about figuring out your caloric intake, things like that. Maybe trying to figure out their regularity and how that correlates with what they eat was at the source of this. Maybe this was for good.
July was 48, August was 49, September was 47. So pretty consistent there. The closest he had to one a day was, again, April with 34. So he was just barely over one a day there. So I'd say that's a pretty healthy pooping schedule. 433 to date.
We need to figure out the right metric name for it, because I think that goes a long way in how you brand something in making it really sing. Nate Tice, our buddy over at The Athletic, tweeted out a chart yesterday talking about the NFL, and it was looking at teams' combined success plus explosive play rate on first and second down. So it was S plus EX rate. It was the sex rate. Nate has helped come up with the sex rate for NFL teams. And so if we've got a sex rate, I feel like we need some sort of acronym or combination to get us to the poo quotient or something that we can work with this.
Yeah, you said the word explosive in there. I don't think you want explosive in the poop tracker.
God.
Usually
Jesse seems like she's getting ill with this conversation.
Yep. Just a little bit.
That might be another chart for another day. Let's go to something that I'm sure Jesse is very excited about, given all of her eating proclivities here, and get to the third, someone bringing the Krabby Patty to life.
Yeah, collabs are hot in the streets these days, and Wendy's is getting in on it. They're debuting the Krabby Patty meal on October 8th. So, breaking news, SpongeBob times Wendy's. What's on a Krabby Patty? I don't. Is it going to be a special sauce? It's going to be the special sauce, right?
I was going to say, it's the special sauce. It's what Plankton's been after for years, so of course they're not going to divulge that information publicly. But, Dad, I doubt this means much to you as someone who's not a child of SpongeBob in the way. Jesse, I don't know if you were allowed to watch cartoons, so I don't know what familiarity you have with this at all. None?
I've seen
really sheltered
an episode here or there. I know that there's a squirrel that has
there is a squirrel.
Yeah.
Sandy's an important part of that. Honestly, SpongeBob occupies two weight classes in terms of their fan bases. One, people like me that were children of the late 80s and early 90s who came up watching that, although it's had somewhat of a renaissance now, I think, for younger people. But also, people getting high love to watch SpongeBob when I was like a young adult. That was kind of a weird thing that came up. It's great viewing when you're under the influence a little bit. And so I'd imagine that's going to be the crowd Wendy's is really catering to.
I'm not sure of the taste of a Krabby Patty in a fast food restaurant. I'm not really sure.
It's just a burger.
It's a fast food restaurant in SpongeBob, isn't it? So
yeah, that's all it is.
Oh, it's not a crab patty.
It's not actual crab.
No, it's not crab.
Oh, okay, all right. So it's just the name. Oh, I thought it was crab.
Mr.
Where they tried to make a crab patty.
Mr. Krabs is the guy that owns the burger joint in SpongeBob.
He is himself a crab, but he is not harvesting the innards of his own people in order to make the burger. Although that would be pretty craven and a great plot twist at the end of SpongeBob.
That's what's in the secret sauce.
We'll find out, because I know one thing. They better have had the Wendy's employees sign NDAs, or else this is going to get messy really, really quick. Speaking of messy, this show sometimes can be described as that. You can describe us as that if you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating. Tell us how many times you poop. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.